Oh yeah, it's supposed to be a video about solar. I'm going to talk to you a little bit and answer a whole bunch of questions about my 12 volt, 110 volt split system that I didn't answer in my previous videos, and I'm going to help anybody who's trying to choose their system figure out how to do that in the simplest way possible. Stick around. I had a really hard time finding videos about making a 12 volt, 110 volt split system. But I got ahead of myself because I went through an entire process before I even made the video in order to get to the point where I could install it and show everybody. So I want to tell you how I got there without making it sound too technical and explain the simple process of how I picked a system. First things first, money. I didn't want to spend $100,000 on a system that was going to run everything that I run in this house. It's a camp. I'm going to use it for the weekend. I'm not going to use it every day. I have 4 days, maybe 5 days a week to charge it. I don't need it to be up to charge every single day on demand. So that's a big cost savings when you don't have to have a system that's very big in order to save you the money. You're going to have to make sacrifices. A lot of the sacrifices come in the form of major appliances because they have a big draw on your system. So if you're able to convert your hot water heater over to propane, if you're able to cook with propane or wood, if you're able to heat your building, camp, house with wood, you're going to save a huge demand on your fire, you're going to save a huge amount of money on your system right there, because you're going to take away a whole bunch of wattage per hour just in those simple systems that we use for convenience every day, which is really remarkable, because if we were going to turn around and try and make a system that's that big, you would spend an astronomical amount of money. And if you can afford to put one of those systems in, you can likely afford just to keep raw power in. Typically the videos that I'm seeing are of people who are in remote locations who don't have access to grid power, and they spend the equivalent amount of money on an off-the-grid system to replace what they would have on the grid. And they would normally choose that. I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you're trying to supplement something, like you're trying to put it in a garage, or you maybe even heat the toilet seat in an outhouse, that just momentarily, just to kind of get through. So that's where I'm going to take you. I'm going to take you to a system that's big enough to do that. We can focus on your price point. Just understand that you're going to have to make sacrifices based on how much money you have. And I've made conversions into a 12 volt system, so I didn't have to make as many sacrifices as other people would have. Now, if you're talking about trying to convert a camp or something like that, you can look at a way of measuring how much power you consume during the course of a day. If you're a household of 5 like me, or if you're a household of 1, you know what your average daily consumption of power is if you have a power bill. You have the ability to take your billing period and your kilowatt hours on your bill. It will state how much you use during that bill period, and you will divide it by the amount of days. The reason I say day is because you only get one solar charge cycle per day. That's from sun up to sundown. And if your daily kilowatt usage is very high, then you're going to have to either build your system up to that level to maintain your lifestyle, or you can go around, pick half the things that you don't need and reduce that level by half and try and meet that demand, and find sacrifices or extras as you go. I figured out how much I needed based on my power bill per day with 5 people, and I decided I was going to use it for 3 days at most, and I divided that amount of power into 3 days of usage. Now, big thing is that I can pick my 3 days of usage based on the weather and everything going on, and at most I have 5 days to charge in between, maybe 4, based on the weather. So you've just figured out what your daily kilowatt usage is. You have to pick your appliances that you want to have or don't have. You've decided to convert over propane, you can write that off, and wood, you can write that off. If you haven't done that, you've picked an alternate heat source that doesn't require electricity, because that's your biggest demand, is generating heat. And you're going to pick an average system. The system that I picked is a 400 watt panel with a 40 amp charger that has the capacity to hold 580 watts of panels, and I chose to do 3 individual 100 amp hour batteries, giving me 300 amp hours of battery storage. What does it all mean? I want you to take the time right now, and if you just close your eyes and just hear what I have to say, if you're trying to figure out how solar actually works in comparison to something that you would understand every day. If you need to consume energy, store it, and then convert it into something else, I want you to now think about having a jug of water, pouring it through a funnel into a cup. The jug of water will represent your source of energy, which would be the sun, and then the funnel would represent the solar panels. And as you increase the size of your funnel to capture more water, you can capture more energy. And that's exactly what happens with solar panels. Your rate of capture increases with the size of your array. That's simple. That means that you get more energy off a larger array faster. And will come up, and that will be converted into kilowatts, is what you hear people say on the internet. And then your charger has a capacity that you need to be cognizant of based on how those solar panels are arranged by the manufacturer. And you can choose to put them in parallel series, which is technical jargon. I'm not going to get into it. You can look that up by more qualified people than me. One of the big lessons you need to learn is that depending on how you connect them, those panels can be arranged so that they're high voltage and low amperage, or high amperage and low voltage. My system is set up to be low voltage, high amperage, and I am coming up well short of the 40 amp capacity of my charger, but I still only have 180 watts available in the solar panels to handle all of that charging capacity. So there's limitations based on what is paired. Typically when you buy from a company like I did through Renology, the appropriate chargers are paired with the appropriate solar panel packs, and it's really hard to go over the maximums based on how you arrange them. When you're looking at building it from scratch, which is quite often cheaper, you can decide how you want to run it. The bigger you can afford in a charger, the better it is. Mine's 40 amp, that's a moderate size for a weekend user like me, but I've used 20 amp as well, and it's done a great job at holding a charge and a battery for me to use one for an afternoon or an entire day. Now, without getting too boring here, I'm going to talk about batteries a little bit. You can do a bunch of your own research, but I want to make you aware of something that you probably aren't connecting the dots with. I have used lead acid batteries in my place because I need the ability to charge below zero. That's right. Lithium phosphate batteries cannot be charged below zero because it'll cause damage to the batteries. The way that they're composed, and you can go research all that on your own. That's simply the way it is. If you want to know what the actual issue is with lithium, lithium is extremely efficient, and its holding capacity for a charge is very high. It has on-demand power. It has a very useful function. It's almost 10 times as efficient as a lead acid battery, but once you get below zero, it's no longer able to take a charge. And in my function, where my building is not heated year round, I couldn't take the risk of investing in such an expensive battery, even though the storage per dollar is at a better rate and more efficient. Because I couldn't go below the temperature of 0 degrees or freezing, I wasn't sure. We're testing that right now, and I've done a bunch of shorts on the aluminum can that I have in the building with water in it. If that bulges out after it freezes, then that means that my larger battery packs would also freeze. Even though it's safe for them to freeze, it would mean that it's not safe for me to get lithium phosphate in the future. So that's an ongoing, never-ending experiment with the temperatures of an unheated building, because I chose to upgrade that building with spray foam insulation for efficiency purposes. Now, I went with lead acid. It doesn't have the same capacity, so I ordered an extra battery. Instead of the 2 that I believe I just need, I got 1 more for extra storage capacity. So if my demands exceed my expectations, then I should be able to absorb a little bit of error in my calculations. Something for you to remember: research your batteries. Know whether or not your place is going to freeze. If it doesn't freeze, invest in the best battery you can get. Here's a warning about lithium. as compared to lead acid. Lead acid is in everything. Everything that you have in your house right now, including the remote control in your hands to turn off your television, and the batteries in your mouse and your computer, have lead acid batteries in them. I'm sorry to tell you, they are very safe. Those are sealed just like the same batteries that I have in the barn door right now. They're sealed lead acid batteries. No different, the same, just larger. There's vented lead acid batteries. You have to vent the off gases from charging outside. That's not what I have. I have sealed. So I don't have to worry about that. And the instructions from the manufacturer state they are safe for indoor storage and use. You can put them under your coffee table and not worry about them. Just protect them from voltage. Now, lithium, if you have been into the news media a little bit, lithium has a battery management system. Whether you're in a cellular phone, whether you're in a car, or whether you're in an e-bike, the lithium batteries in all of those respective things have their own battery management systems in them. They're called BMSs. And the way that they work is that they consume power to maintain the battery temperature, because all lithium batteries need to stay above zero for the most part in order for them to take a charge without taking damage. Lithium ion is a little different, but especially the lithium phosphate, which is the most efficient and latest product on the market. If you look at the lithium batteries that you see in cars, you'll recognize, maybe recently in the news, that a whole bunch of the Tesla robot cars could not take a charge because it was so cold that they couldn't charge. What was happening was that the superchargers they were plugged into were unable to heat the batteries up warm enough for them to then receive a charge, because they are not allowed to be charged when cold. They have to go through their cold cycle, be heated up, and then plugged in, and then they're fine. When they're being driven while being that cold, they also consume power at an enormously high rate. And this is what you're seeing in the videos online that people are not explaining, is the battery management system is creating a short in the batteries in order for them to maintain heat. The power companies do it all the time on their main transmission lines. They'll create a temporary short to heat off all of the ice off their lines. That is how they maintain the transmission of electricity efficiency. Now, it goes both ways. Maybe you've seen some of the news articles about lithium batteries on airplanes in pockets exploding. Maybe you've seen the articles about a fellow getting on the subway with his battery-powered e-bike and then it catching fire and burning down the subway. Well, here's the other thing that happens. When you go from an extremely cold temperature to a warm environment, the battery management system is not regulating the battery based on the outside temperature, it's based on the internal temperature. So if the battery itself and all the little cells within it are still freezing cold after you got off your bike ride up in the street and you went into a warm environment, such as a subway car, and you're standing there and your BMS is still running trying to warm up those cells despite it going to a different temperature environment, your BMS can heat up the outside cells faster, depending on how the wiring is and how the manufacturer. The outside cells are heating up faster due to the external temperature being higher and causing fires. So all of these lithium phosphate batteries have internal BMS regulators in them. Supercars have them. All the packs, everything that is lithium is managed, even if it's just through your cell phone. When you keep your phone inside your pocket, you're best to keep it inside your jacket, because keeping that temperature up, even the GoPro that I'm talking to you on, the batteries that it has, the management of those batteries recommends that those battery temperatures be kept inside your jacket in the cold and then used temporarily and put back in so that to maintain the charge, because the battery itself has to use power in order to maintain its own efficiency. That's a hard pill to swallow when you spend a whole bunch of money on a battery. Dustin off Destination Adventure learned that lesson the hard way in a recent video, and I cringed when I seen that he bought lithium phosphate, and I'm betting he wished he had someone like me in a video like this to help him understand his choices in his environment and his usage for his camper build. And I feel real bad for him, and he's taken extraordinary measures in order to keep that battery in place. It's very hard to manage. It's just, if you do a little bit of research, you can save yourself a lot of headaches down the road, and that's what I'm trying to help you out with here today. So we covered the solar panels. The bigger the funnel, the more energy you take in, the faster your batteries will charge, the more access to power you have. Charging isn't the only issue. Storage is the other issue. How much do you think you need? You'll have to experiment with it. Your amp hours, you can go through, you can find the calculations, convert amp hours into watts, and how many watts you have. If you get into kilowatts, then you can have that as well. It's your voltage times your amperage, and then times that by the hours. Amp hours is what's on the side of the battery, so a lot of batteries are either 10 or 20 amp hour configurations to figure out their rate of discharge. I've put 3 in place, so I have 3 times the rate of discharge, 3 times the amount of time for discharge off one battery cell because I hooked them up. Let's talk about the 12 volt aspect of things. When you have 110 volts, you have to do approximately 10 laps of the same track at 12 volts would take in order to make 110. And that's ultimately what an inverter does. It collects up enough energy to have an output of 110 alternating current. Now, the complications of how that happens, what you need to understand is that it's not 100% efficient either. It uses energy to create that energy and convert that energy. So the most efficient ones on the market are around 90%. You're going to burn energy making that energy. That's not a good thing. That's where 12 volt comes in. If the solar panel is making 12 volts of energy and charging your batteries up using the 12 volts of energy, the more things you can run off of 12 volts, it's a 1-to-1 ratio, not a 10-to-1 ratio. That's direct in, direct out. So that's why you see me powering 800 square feet in my building off 3 watts of energy. Whereas if I had all my 110 lights installed in that building, I would have to go through a conversion of 12 volts all the way up to 10 times to put out maybe into an 8 watt or 6 watt energy efficient bulb. So I would have twice the wattage consumption after a 10 volt run up or 10 times run up in voltage. That's not the most efficient way, and then there's losses off that like we've already discussed. So the more you can put under a 12 volt regime of power, the better in a camp like situation and even a home situation. You can get 12 volt appliances, you can get 12 volt fridges, everything that goes with it, everything that's in a camper ultimately that runs off 12 volt you can get. You just have to deal with the limitations, restrictions in size that come with it, or the hefty price of having something that is wired in such a way because it's not a high production, high demand item. It'd be really nice if it was, but it's not. I've blended the automotive market, so you can take an automotive radio, you can take automotive lights, you can take automotive wiring, which you see on my wall in my previous video for Weekend Solar, and you can use automotive fuses. It gets very cheap to run 12 volt stuff, everything that's 12 volt. I plan on running as much 12 volt as I can while having access to 110 volt for all of the common items such as a television or projector or internet and charging your cell phones and all that different stuff. One thing to remember, that the products you use when you do install your solar system, the more you can store in battery capacity, the better. But the more things you use that use battery capacity, the easier it is on your system. And what I mean is that if you have a cell phone that you need to charge off your system, that power consumption is almost nothing. You're going to get an entire day's use, you're going to plug your cell phone in, and you're not going to have any drop in any consumption of power. It's almost nothing. If you have tools that are charging off batteries, they're going to charge throughout the day, you're going to use them throughout the day. As long as you have an appropriate charger ratio to your batteries that you'd use normally anyway off 110, you're not going to see any difference. And you're not going to have any issues running all those tools that you could normally use off 110 anyway. So there's no harm in that. So that's why you see me convert using cordless tools, because in the background I have them charging off the system while the system is overproducing power anyway, and my batteries never drop below 100% currently, even though I'm using all these high amperage power tools, because they're not directly connected to the surge in the system. So the more of a buffer you can put it in. And one of the interesting things was that I had a conversation online through an off-grid group that was very helpful in discussing, and they had this amazing outcry in response. And one of the comments on there, they were asking if I could run a washer and dryer for clothes because the lady had 4 kids. And I said, no, absolutely not. The reason is that the load that washer dryer would put on my system for 20 or 30 minutes would drain the battery pile completely, because the 12 volt run up times 10 and do 110, and then the load of it in draw is so high that it would likely overheat and overrun my system to the point where I can't use it anymore. Now, 30 minutes isn't enough. But the idea I had back is like, it's too bad someone couldn't create a battery that could be charged to run that system, and you could do a load of laundry in it, and then you could have a battery that charges and runs an entire load of the dryer, and then when it's not being used, it's charging up, and then you just go again when it says it's ready. And in that case, you would only have to increase your solar array in order to charge those batteries to run those individual load appliances, because the batteries that would be in them individually, probably enormous and well above the scope of my understanding. It would be the only way that I could understand and comprehend them being able to use it off such a low demand system. So maybe that's something that in the future we could explore, making a battery powered 12 volt system that runs specifically on these things. I don't know. Last but not least, inverters. I'm going to make this simple for you. Buy the biggest one you can afford. The bigger the better. They have an efficiency rating. Get the most efficient one, the biggest one. If you can afford a 7,000 watt, I would go for it. I bought a 3,000 watt. That's large enough to run a microwave. You can buy a 1,000 watt. That's large enough to run most of your smaller things like a television, laptop, and all of the small draw things. But you want a little bit of a surge capacity there for the wattage, because whenever the things turn on, they use a little bit more power than average. Buy the biggest one and that you can afford. Only buy a sine wave inverter. And a sine wave inverter converts the actual wave from being a sharp square wave, which is a surge of power and power off, and surge of power and power off. It converts it into a smooth linear sinusoidal wave. It means that the gradual on and off surge of power, it helps with maintaining heat and keeps it from having to oversurge a lot of the sensitive electronics and very small electronic motherboards and things that are very heat sensitive. That surge of power causes a lot of heat all at once, and then the constant cycling of it in an unimaginably high rate is what ends up causing a lot of issues for a lot of people when you don't have a sine wave inverter. So simply put, the size of your inverter has nothing to do with your battery pile. The size of your inverter determines your consumption and the output of your 110 volt system. I went with 12 volt to 110 volt. There's many different sizes, 24, 48, all these different sizes of voltage conversions. The simple way of understanding this is that the closer you are to 110 volt in storage, say you have a 24 volt system or a 48 volt system, which is very common, the more efficient it is for your system to go from the stored voltage to the output voltage. It's less distance between the two voltages. It's less work for the inverter, less heat generated, less power losses, and more storage capacity. I didn't want to spend all the money to convert up to a larger system so that I could just run everything on one basic 110 voltage. That's where things get very expensive. I decided to cut my losses and convert everything down to 12 volts that I could, and then only use 110 volts at a lower wattage, which is more price point efficient in my case because I'm only using it for 3 days at a time at max. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys, but do your research into inverters, and there's a lot on the market there. Sine wave inverters. Wattage is the bigger you can get. Has nothing to do with your battery storage. It has everything to do with dealing with heat and dealing with load and how much you consume. If down the road you find you don't have something that's big enough, it's always easier to have something too big than it is something too small. And shopping around, you can definitely find something that's more cost efficient. On that, If you're going through my video there about the weekend solar, you'll see I've included a list in that video of all the things that I purchased in order to install the 12 volt 110 volt conversion. The prices have changed significantly in the months since then, and I'm sure in the future, whenever you're watching this video, if it's in a year, 2 or 3 years, you're going to find the prices are much different than what I paid, a total of $2,500 for everything. What I want you to know is that you can shop around and you will get down that price point. These are very common, things that are going on for a very long time. Just keep an eye out, check the warehouse. If you're not on Amazon, there's lots of closeout deals and lots of providers. Just because you don't buy what I bought doesn't mean what you bought is no good. It just means that it's different and you're gonna have to make adjustments as you go anyway based on your consumption because you're different than me. If I can do it with a family of 5, 3 kids and everything off this system, you can do it. Anybody can do this. It's just having that first thing, the money to do it. And I realize that $2,500 isn't within the reach. So if you take your money, you go to a salvage yard, buy a 12 volt battery, a deep cycle battery if you can, but just a 12 volt battery, go buy a $21 20 amp charge controller, and you go buy a $150 100 watt solar panel, you can do all of this for under 200 bucks. And I'm not joking. On a very basic level, you can get a 12 volt system set up and with lights in your deepest, darkest cave, in your deepest, darkest canyon, and wherever you're at in the woods, you can put a panel in and you can get at least something going so that you have something when you get there. Light is our biggest friend and our biggest enemy. When we don't have it, everyone gets scared. And when we do have it, we just have this automatic level of comfort. So if you can generate light, heat, you can do a lot of different things. And keep that in mind when you're buying your solar. You don't have to go as big as I went, and you certainly can go much bigger if you have the budget for it. That's how I went through. I went through my power bill, I picked my budget, I figured out what I could give up, and I created a split system that allows me to have the size of my inverter and maintain the same level of electricity demands that I would need for 3 days, given that I have 4 days to charge up the batteries completely and maintain them in the event I don't have the best weather while I'm there using it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully this is helpful to some of you, and hopefully it answers some of your basic questions, and hopefully you're not too overwhelmed. Don't be scared of it. I know that it is difficult. It's overwhelming. There's no one else that I could find that's doing a 12 volt 110 split system in the way that I'm doing it, and hopefully it helps you out in giving you confidence that you can dig into 2 of the largest markets, both automotive and household, in order to make your system work for you on a much smaller budget than the average person. Off the grid is a hard thing to do, and it's hard to understand where your efficiencies are and aren't without actually doing it in the first place. Hopefully it helps. We'll see you around.